Okay, Elliot said, as someone who has worked outside Star Citizen and have mates in other companies, the industry knows Star Citizen pushes tech for all of us. I know I can be seen as biased, but it's the truth. Things like server meshing, other games have taken the concept and made it on smaller scales. I don't understand that, Elliot, because we don't have server meshing, so could you elaborate a bit? Or are you talking about something that we don't have, but you guys have and you have shared with like other games? Not like shared, but like told them how to do that. Is that it? We made the concept of server meshing and talked about it publicly. Other games took that concept and have made it on smaller scales for their games. Oh, I didn't know that. I guess it's cool. I don't know what your like standpoint on that is, honestly. Because like it's not theft, right? But you didn't patent it, so I don't know. Personally, as a gamer, which I am to the core, it pushes every game forward, so I am all for it. That's why we love you. What Shadow of Mordor did with the Nemesis system upset me. What is that? I have no idea, Elliot. The Nemesis. I'm not sure. You don't know how to spell the word. Okay, I guess it's Nemesis, right? The Nemesis system, you can't spell. You're probably better than I am. The Nemesis system was like when you hurt an enemy and leave it, the damage persists. If you set them on fire, they remember it and have a dialogue for that. Huh?
If there's one...
So they patent that, like, what? Really? Let me check out this, honestly.
Gameplay innovation.
The video talks over it, but it's a cool system and they made it so not one else can use
that I think deserves another look. It's the Nemesis system, which first appeared in the 2014 game Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. At its most basic, it's a villain generator, capable of populating Mordor with a handful of procedurally generated bad guys. Each one has its own name, look, gameplay traits, and personality, which is revealed in taunting one-liners before combat.
I wonder which of us will kill you first!
But at its best, and especially so in the sequel Shadow of War, it's a full-on story generator, which is able to spin unique and highly personal narratives from your relationships with these orcs. It's a pretty incredible feat of design and engineering. We've seen story generation stuff in games like RimWorld and Crusader Kings, but in a real-time action game with blockbuster graphics, it's unheard of. It's also something I've talked about a number of times on this channel, but I've never really dug into the specifics of how it works. To be honest, I've always been intimidated by the sheer complexity of the thing. That is, until now. It's about time I finally gave it a go. So, hi, I'm Mark Brown, this is Game Maker's
I never
Toolkit,
played this.
And here's how the Nemesis system creates stories. A quick note before I start. To save time and make things easier, I'm mostly going to talk about these two games as a single entity, which I'll just call Mordor. It's worth noting that Shadow of War makes massive changes and improvements to the system, but the broad strokes do apply to both games. If I had to choose an analogy for the way Mordor tells stories, I'd go with improvisational theatre, where unscripted stories spontaneously evolve as the performance goes on, and especially the rule yes and, which is about always accepting your partner's prompt and building on it. And that's exactly how it works in Mordor. The player does something, the game recognizes it, and builds on it. So you might run away from a battle with an orc captain to save your skin and get called a coward in a future encounter.
Not letting you run this time! Oh, he's gonna finish it!
Or you might put a spy into the enemy's ranks, only for the next orc you meet to say,
"We know you planted a spy. Don't know who he is yet, but we'll..."
I get it now. This is so cool, dude. This is so fucking cool.
Just torture Mag.
But also, I completely understand why you got pissed off.
It's until we find him.
The way this works is that the game is always secretly cataloguing your interactions with the game, and the orcs can then reference this list in order to choose the most interesting line of dialogue at the start of your next encounter. And that's really clever, because it means the way you communicate to the game, the way you make your
It's
improvisation
gym time, but if you're still streaming, I shall be back. But this system is cool, but they made it so no one else can use it. And I feel like that limits the innovation purely to that company. Dude, that's so... Before you go, I gotta tell you this. That's like... Jesus fucking Christ. I didn't know that people actually did that. I know that people did that in music, and it fucking pisses me off. So, for example, you have like a chord progression, and then you get sued because you use the same chord progression. Jesus, come on, words. Chord progression as the other song, but it's just fucking 4 chords. And if you look at pop songs in the past like 3, 4, 5 decades, they're basically, most of the pop songs, the most popular songs, are the same fucking chord progression. So why aren't they like suing each other? Well, because then it's just like melody. Well, how can you fucking patent a chord progression or a melody or whatever? So to cut the story short, there's a guy that's like a lawyer that teamed up with some devs, and they made a hard drive with AI generated chord progressions and melodies in all the keys and all the time measures, so they could have all of that, so they can like copyright or patent all of that, not for them to like have all the melodies and all like the combinations of chords ever, but for them to give the people or like the next generations of musicians something to do, so they don't get fucking sued by some previous generations that like, we already did that. Like, why? GPT Bieber. Yeah. You see a game like Wolfenstein, one of the first FPS games, if they did that, we can have Call of Duty, Half-Life, Bioshock. Honestly, I don't like Call of Duty, so I would be down for that. But yeah, it's completely understandable. It's like, doing this is awful, dude. It's awful. And like once you said this, now I'm like wondering how many companies actually did that. Like, what if Portal patented portals in the game, and that's why we don't have more games with like that kinds of like what are they called? Puzzles or whatever. That's Jesus.
suggestions is
Not
through
gonna lie, this is amazing. This is really cool, but like restricting this to just them is just like ugh.
the most basic
Awful.
actions of play. Things like kill, flee, injure, heal, or gather intel. The things you're doing anyway in order to play the game,
But
get
also, like,
used
what
by the
did they
Nemesis system
patent?
as a jumping off.
Like, did they patent like the program that they're using, or did they like patent the whole thing? So none of the like games after this one, or that are not made by the same company, can have like these kinds of like modular responses. I don't think it was the devs who did it. It was a concept, the theory of. Oh my god.
Off point for
Jesus.
the narrative. But this can also go the other way with the orcs.
If they patent the coding, then you can like code around it and make it more, make it the same but different, right? I guess you can. But if they patented like the responses and like the way they act, or like if the painted is that like, I'm not even sure if I'm saying patent as I should, but if they did that so no other games can have enemies that are going to talk to you and respond to you into your actions like they are here, then like fuck off. I think it will be the money hungry higher ups, probably,
giving prompts, and hopefully the player will take the bait and build on the story themselves. Take this Olog called Arcaro, who beat me to a pulp, bent down, picked up my sword.
You know what? They have such a good thing, and then his character model like clips through the other character models.
And broke it.
See you, Elliot.
You think this
I think I'll be
was
streaming.
me?
I'm gonna try to play Star Citizen today.
I guess I'll be tracking him down. Okay, so that's the basics. But this left developer Monolith Productions with a problem. In a game that's all about death and violence, how do you make these stories last longer than a single encounter? You can't have improv if your partner is dead, after all. The solution was to find ways for an encounter to end that don't involve death. So for one, the player is always able to run away from a battle, and is often encouraged to do so because it's difficult to recover health in the middle of combat. Some orcs also retreat when their life is in danger. Also, right at the moment of death, it's possible for the encounter to go a very different way.
I can't go down like this! I won't go down like this!
A downed orc might defy death and have a tricky escape. Or if the player is about to die, the orc might decide to just humiliate them and walk away. Take Marku, a wiry little archer who keeps downing me with his poisonous arrows, but always stops short of finishing the job.
Get up, man filth. I want a victory, not a mercy killing. It'll be too easy to kill you like this. Come on, show me some pride of Gondor or whatever you men are always going on about.
But even if Talion does actually die, that's not the end. In almost every game, the player's death is a non-canonical error that gets erased when you rewind to a previous save point. It's rare to find games where the player's demise is actually weaved into the narrative in an interesting way. But in Mordor, protagonist Talion is a grave walker, a man stuck between life and death, which gives him the power to endlessly come back to life, like someone respawning in a multiplayer match. And this allows for a key narrative trope: revenge.
Imagine them like patenting this so you can't even fucking respawn in any game. That would be amazing, right?
Revenge! Revenge for sword!
See you, Nerosin, or Nerosin.
Well, he won't be a problem anymore. Monolith says it was inspired by the Burnout games, where you can get wrecked by rival racers and then you're dropped straight back onto the track so you can hunt down that car and enact some sweet justice. It's only because crashing is not considered a failure in Burnout that this sort of story can happen. The studio was also inspired.
So they saw something in another game and they liked it, so they used it, and then they didn't let... They made something new and they don't let anyone use it.
That's by the kill cam in Call of Duty games, where you get to see the person who just killed you and then can respawn into the map and hunt them down. In fact, a lot of Mordor's design was about trying to replicate multiplayer relatedness with computer-controlled characters. And it's not just Talion who can respawn. Every enemy you slay has a small chance to cheat death and reappear later in the game, perhaps with injuries, scars, and prosthetics, which is another chance for the game to reflect the player's actions back on them. Like, for example, maybe I was being a bit hasty when I said Arcaro the Swordbreaker wouldn't be a problem, because half an hour later, look who showed up in the middle of a fight.
I should thank you. Whatever
his head is attached to the body.
magics you used when you took my head will not allow me to die. Getting killed by you was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Gulp. Put all of this together, plus some other possible outcomes that I'll speak about later, and we can see that there's many ways for the relationship between Talion and an orc to go forward, from humiliation to fleeing to cheating death. And so, whatever way the encounter ends, every time you meet this orc again, the process repeats, but now with a memory of your previous run-ins to reference and build the story further. Something else happens when an enemy kills you. They level up, they gain new strengths and shed old weaknesses, they get emboldened, and they often challenge a bigger orc for their position. You see, it would get boring if you just kept meeting the same orcs again and again without any change or growth in the relationship. So the Nemesis system needs some kind of framework for these stories to grow on, and in Mordor, Monolith used one that's familiar and easily understandable to anyone who's worked in a job or been in a prison gang.
We're gonna come back to Star Citizen. I just want to watch this, honestly.
In Shadow of War,
and I think
every
it's like
orc exists in a top-down organization of
I guess it's fun for you guys.
Overlord.
I never heard about this game ever.
Captains and the soldiers, who are just typical disposable
it's
NPC
really cool.
enemies. Though if they kill you, they have every chance of getting promoted to captain themselves. Killing Talion can make the enemy rise up through the ranks, but if you shame a war chief, they'll get demoted back down to captain. And it's not all about Talion. Orcs are given randomly generated missions that automatically resolve after a certain amount of time and can lead to promotion, demotion, and death, causing the balance of power to organically shift as you play. So if Talion's immortal nature lends itself to stories of vengeance, the hierarchical framework leads to different story tropes, such as fall from grace and rags to riches. Like in my game, how Marku, the humiliating orc captain, decided...
Like, I never even, like, heard about this game. So the thing that I say, like, here and there, before Star Citizen, I played... I have heard of Castlevania, but I never played it. Ninetales gang assassination hierarchy mission. So before Star Citizen, I played Red Dead Redemption 2, and before that, this is how it goes. I was like a full-time musician for 10 plus years, more than 10 years, and whenever I had off time, I would play either Project Reality or Squad, but that wasn't that much. Before that, I played all the games, like up until high school, or up until I was like 19. When I left high school, I was playing everything. But after that, only like the biggest titles. I even like GTA 5. I played it like in 2022, I think. No, 20. What is it now? 2023. So I played it like right after Red Dead Redemption 2.
To finally finish
Everybody
the job
played it. I didn't.
And use his newfound status.
You know what I would do? I will watch like walkthroughs on YouTube if I was interested in the game.
To overthrow the Overlord for top position. Which is quite
and
the move
I played
up.
Space
That's
Engineers.
like me getting 1 million subscribers and then submitting my resume to become the CEO of YouTube. But it also means that Marku is now absolutely
so I have never
untouchable
heard of this.
Unless I lead a full-on assault of his heavily guarded fortress. The orcs can also have other relationships, like a captain being a bodyguard to a war chief, or one orc being a devoted blood brother to another.
I won't see my blood brother slain by such a useless little tark.
And later in the game,
you know what? This is so
cool
because they have recorded all the audio for all the possible, and they're not even endings, right? They're just like all the possibilities, basically.
Relationships by recruiting orcs onto your side of the war. So after Marku became Overlord, I had an idea. No matter how many times I killed Arcoro the Stitch, he kept coming back, this time with a massive iron helmet holding his head together.
Is that surprise I see on your face?
Jesus Christ, this guy.
Did you really think you killed me? Don't make me laugh. It may tear my stitches.
And it was at this point that I realized that me and the Stitch have more in common than I first thought. We're two immortal souls trapped in an endless battle of
Don't
death
even fight him,
respawn.
honestly.
And so if I'm going to build an army to take down Marku the Humiliator, perhaps we should actually work together.
I swear allegiance to you.
Now, I'll admit that the
This is
relationship
amazing. I want to play this game now.
Talion
This is
and his
amazing.
followers isn't quite as well defined as Talion and his rivals. It is, after all, called the Nemesis system. So a recruited captain will effectively leave the map and may have very little interaction with Talion from that point onwards. It can be as much of an endpoint as the orc's death. But there are some interesting possibilities. a recruit may decide to betray you and return to the enemy's side.
You all
might
fucking
install a
play this
spy
game?
in the enemy's ranks, only
God
for him
damn
to
it,
be
I never
found
heard
out
of it.
and executed. And a favoured follower might show up in a clutch moment to save you from certain death.
Death cannot take you today, just as it cannot take me.
Thanks, buddy. Whatever the case, these different relationships help flesh out stories because they
Would be
force
so funny if you recruited him and like he never dies and he dies the first time you fight against the orcs.
the narrative to grow beyond simple one-on-one tales between Talion and a single orc. Instead,
It's on
it creates
Steam?
a weaving
Yeah, I'll check
matrix
it out
of
later.
different relationships and dependencies that can lead to more exciting stories. So hopefully you can now see why I make the link between Mordor and Improv. In most video game stories, the narrative is entirely predetermined.
See, like this game, I watched a walkthrough.
Even those
on
games
YouTube.
with branching paths and multiple endings are all plotted out ahead of time, like a choose-your-own-adventure book. The player then navigates their way through this scripted story. But in Mordor, the story evolves unpredictably because it's entirely based on your interactions with these orcs. It's
This is so
constructed
cool.
at runtime, encounter by encounter, using
Imagine having this in Star Citizen.
your interactions as narrative brickwork. Systems like cheating death and humiliation allow the stories to be longer. The hierarchy allows the cast of characters to grow and change. And relationships between the different orcs creates a web of interlocking characters. But even though we've now got
Squadron
a pretty
42,
solid
yeah,
system that
no.
allows for stories to happen,
Well, you know already that that's not going to happen because of the patent.
how does Monolith make sure that those stories are actually any good? First, it's important that you can actually remember and distinguish between these different orcs. You'll encounter around 100 captains over the course of a game, and
Oh
so
my
it's
God.
vitally important that the player is able to keep track of their relationships with the key players. An orc might remember you, but you don't always remember them. To make this work, the orcs need to have really strong personalities. They need to be visually interesting and have unique traits, like the singer.
I sing this song with all my breath. Take heed, for this interlude ends with your death.
Or the poet.
Your fate just went from bad to worse. You face an orc who speaks in verse.
Or the obsessed.
Oh, I don't think I've ever seen such a beautiful corpse. This is a corpse you could love and love and love.
These orcs reference their unique trait
This is
constantly
amazing.
to keep it memorable. So you might not remember his name, but you will remember that guy who keeps talking about branding. And to keep it consistent, the game defines the orc's identity first, and then makes everything else support that, such as the weapon it uses, the outfit it wears, the
Yeah,
choices it
orc
makes
bars.
in combat, and even its mannerisms, like
Amazing.
this goddamn singing orc who constantly says,
Let's sing.
because while Mordor is highly
And then
systemic
he
and
fucking
makes
slams you with the loot.
significant use
Amazing.
of procedural generation, there's still a lot of carefully handcrafted content in there which helps certain orcs become highly memorable characters. The Stitch, after all, is just a handcrafted character who may appear when an Olog cheats death. But the Stitch could be a captain, a war chief, a spy, a follower, or any other role. There are simply hundreds of voice lines for each orc to account for every eventuality. Second, the game needs to create strong, emotional connections to these orcs. They're not just characters, they're rivals and nemeses. This connection is usually forged when you die. The kill animations are aggressive and painful. The orc insults you with taunts after your death, and we see the orc celebrating your demise and being rewarded with a promotion. They may even change their name to denote the way they murdered you. If this isn't enough, you're encouraged to get revenge for gameplay purposes, because killing an orc who murdered you leads to way better loot. Now,
Not
these
gonna lie, this is amazing.
stories can be filled with really cool moments. Things
But
like
also, like, not letting other people use the same mechanic. Not use the same mechanic, but like develop the same mechanic in their game. Oh my god. Like, it's so yuck.
like an orc cheating death, repeatedly humiliating you, betraying your trust, or becoming a deranged, babbling weirdo. These can be really powerful bits of narrative, but only when they're rare occurrences. If it happens over and over, it becomes rote predictable, and just another gameplay mechanic. So these events are designed to be uncommon. According to Monolith, in a typical playthrough of Shadow of War, the vast majority of orcs will never cheat death, meaning that these truly Nemesis-style relationships feel rare and memorable. To make this happen, well, almost everything in Mordor has a random chance to occur. If you're downed, there's an invisible die roll to see if a follower orc will save your life. And simply put, all of the most surprising interactions are given an incredibly low chance of ever happening.
Shadow of Mordor.
And going further, some events,
I think that's
certain
like the
transformations, can only happen
latest
once
sequel.
and then are locked from ever happening again in that playthrough, to ensure that those moments are truly surprising. Ideally, we want these rare occurrences to happen to the orcs we actually know and remember. So, you need to know about a secret statistic that every orc carries with them, the player interaction score, which ticks up every time you re-encounter the same orc. The higher the PIS, the more likely that the orc will cheat death, survive in battles with other orcs, and more. And so, in play, it means that the orcs you know the best, the ones who have killed you multiple times or have shown up again and again, are the ones most likely to stick around and to have the key roles in the story going forward. Of course, it wouldn't be good if an orc cheated death, but spawned in some obscure part of the map and you never saw them again. So to make sure those cast members stay relevant, Monolith cheats with how orcs spawn and will allow a key rival or nemesis to teleport in at the most inopportune moment. Orcs can even travel between the different regions in rare circumstances, so characters you had a strong relationship with in one part of the game will come
ambushed by a guy with a fucking loot
back in another. There are even more secret stats behind the scenes to help drive drama and bring balance to stories. For example, if you just kill or recruit every orc you encounter, it's likely that your story is getting a bit one note. So, design director Bob Roberts says, "That's a knob we can turn. If you're doing too well, maybe somebody should piss you off and betray you and give you a revenge target to go after." Though I'm not sure how aggressive this balancing is. There were times when I had to manually increase the difficulty level because the game was just too easy and my stories were becoming stagnant. And finally, Monolith knows when to step back. Ultimately, much of the narrative in Mordor takes place in the player's head as they make connections, infer relationships, and generate histories that may not actually be there. For example, this orc appears and says he wants to get vengeance for me killing his blood brother.
You gotta be careful in Mordor, haven't ya? You never know who's got a big brother, keen for revenge.
But notably, stops short of saying who that brother actually is. This allows me to fill in who would be the most interesting candidate for a revenge narrative. The orcs only have short stabs of dialogue after all, not massive plot-driving cutscenes. But these core anchors are enough for the player to fill in the blanks. It's human nature to find patterns and build narratives from disparate events, so why not just leave some of the heavy lifting to the player's brain? So put all of this together and you get some
short sentences is basically all you need when you have this kind of like character progression and you can like interact with them. So this is
pretty
fucking
amazing stories. Like the random Olog who broke my sword and got promoted to captain, only for me to hunt him down and chop him to bits. He then came back to life as the Stitch, an unstoppable patchwork predator who just wouldn't stay dead. But with the humiliating Marku now locked up safe in his fortress, this encouraged me to recruit the Stitch into my army and make him my bodyguard. We went on adventures together. I healed him when he nearly died, and he saved my life when I was close to death. And when I built my army, installed my spies, stormed the fortress, and finally killed Marku, you can be sure who I installed as the new leader. Arkoro the Stitch, death-defying breaker of swords, overlord for life. If there's one question people often ask of the Nemesis system, it's why haven't we seen it in other games? Well, for one thing, the developers at Monolith actually, and annoyingly, have a patent for this system, meaning
this is what Elliot was talking about.
that other studios may be scared.
Right, let's read it out. metas for managing non-player characters and power centers in a computer game are based on character hierarchies and individualized correspondences between each character's traits or rank and events that involve other non-player characters or objects. Players may share power centers, character hierarchies, non-player characters, and related guests involving
system, meaning that other studios
so they just
may be scared to use a similar
patented everything.
System and face legal action. They don't want to end up like, say, The Simpsons Road Rage, which copied Crazy Taxi's legally protected gameplay, leading to a court battle between
This is legally protected? Why?
Crazy Taxi's legally protected gameplay, leading to a court battle between Sega and Fox Interactive. Mordor publisher
Fucking
Warner
hell,
Brothers,
dude.
however, should be free to use the system, and there have been rumors of it showing up in future Batman and Harry Potter games. But we haven't seen anything concrete yet. That being said, we have seen some Nemesis-like mechanics in other games, such as the mercenary system in Assassin's Creed Odyssey and the play-as-anyone mechanic in Watch Dogs Legion. But because these systems only have a surface-level take on the system, without the massive structural overhaul or the focus on making more meaningful stories emerge, these things just can't touch Mordor when it comes to generating narratives. But one big reason for the Nemesis system losing popularity might be that while Shadow of War is an incredible next-generation step in procedurally generated stories, the only thing anyone was talking about upon release was the slimy microtransactions, loot boxes.
Oh, there's that.
overinflated
Oh my god, fuck this game. Never mind, I don't want to play it anymore. Like, that's 2 strikes, you're out. But like, if I'm concerned, like 2 strikes, and this is the second strike. Fuck
endgame
off.
and other
honestly.
trappings of nauseating live service game design. The franchise's good name was tarnished, and the developers' hard work was largely ignored. But I really hope this doesn't mean the end for the Nemesis system. As it stands, I think the system is pretty amazing. Shadow of War is a largely bog-standard open-worlder with Arkham Knight's combat system glued onto it. But it's elevated to something incredibly special thanks to this system. A system that is able to make stories that are meaningful, memorable, and most critically of all, deeply personal to every individual player. But there's
Me neither.
also
I
so
never
much
buy
room
those,
for
but still, I don't want to like play a game. First of all, that's obviously old, and like give them money, the fucking money for the game, because I don't support the microtransactions and all of that shit. Honestly, Overwatch is filled with those now, and it's so like Jesus Christ, you pay fucking $20 for a skin. But I'm not gonna pay for a skin. I don't fucking care. And on top of that, the game is like free to play. So
for this system to grow.
if this was
And
free
so
to play, I
hope
would
we
play
see
it.
it developed even further in future games, whether that's another Middle-earth adventure with even more complex relationships with the orcs, or something else entirely. But for now, I reckon you should give the game another
No.
shot. All of the microtransactions have been removed, and if you play on Nemesis difficulty and pretend the game ends before the enormous epilogue, I think you'll have a good time.
Now to end this, and by this, I mean you.
That's so smart.
Hey, it's
Okay.
in-game
Yeah, I'm gonna share you the video, the Elliot. I guess you can see it still in the chat. But yeah, this whole thing amazed me because I never knew that this kind of a thing existed in a game. But the whole like them patenting the whole thing is just like, Jesus fucking Christ, what are you doing? What are you doing?